Episode 283, Breaking the Cycle with Michele Reyes.
Welcome to Latter-day Life Coaches, the podcast where each episode is a conversation between me, Heather Rackham, and one of my amazing coach colleagues. Each coach here is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a highly trained, experienced life coach making a great impact in the lives of their clients. And together, we have one main goal, helping you live your best life no matter what. You ready for this conversation with a coach? Here we go.
In today's conversation, Heather and Coach Michele Reyes explore the repeating cycle found in the book of Judges and how they mirror the emotional and spiritual patterns we experience in our own lives. Together, they unpack concepts like thought work, overwhelm, imposter syndrome, self-sabotage, nervous system protection, and stepping into divine potential. Through stories of Deborah, Barak, Gideon, and Samson, they reveal how awareness, compassion, and intentional thinking can help us stop repeating unhealthy cycles and move toward growth, healing, and deeper faith. Please enjoy.
Hey, we want to welcome you today to the podcast. I have Coach Michele Reyes with me. Hi, Michele. How you doing?
Hi, Heather. Happy to be here. I'm doing great.
I'm so glad to have you. So Michele and I are going to be discussing the last couple of episodes. We've done a little bit differently here. We're kind of tying in Come Follow Me with our life coaching profession, and it's been really fun. So Michele and I are going to do the same thing today. We're in Judges 2 through 4, 6 through 8, 13 through 16 this week. But before we start this conversation, I would love for you to introduce yourself, Michele. I know you've been on before, but for those who didn't hear, can you just give us a little bit of an introduction?
Yes, absolutely. My name is Michele Reyes, and I am a mom of 7. I've been in the coaching world since 2022. That was the year that I got certified from the life coach school. And afterward, I did a follow-up training with Leah Davidson on nervous system resilience, and then a master coach certification with Edie Wadsworth with the Life Mentoring School. And I have a coaching program where I help women of faith who feel this call to put more good in the world. Maybe they have a passion project and they want to just show up in this way to put good in the world. And I help them with follow through, helping them create that in their lives intentionally. And I love combining thought work, the things that we do in the coaching world, with faith, because I think it's a really powerful way to strengthen faith. So I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, I do too. For me, when I found a lot of the coaching tools that transformed me, it was kind of an aha moment of this is the how to live the gospels and the doctrines of Jesus Christ. I was always stumped by the, Christ-like love, Christ-like charity for all people. Cause I'm like, I can't do that for all people. Some people just drive me crazy. I always felt this block, like there was something, like I just wasn't capable of moving past that. And the thought work in coaching was really helpful for me in understanding that, these people, it might be difficult for me, but that also doesn't mean that it's not available to me to
Right.
have Christ-like love, Christ-like charity for all people as well. So anyway, that's just a little snippet of kind of my testimonial of how coaching really helps us live the gospel in so many ways.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And I think we're going to touch base a little bit today on, you said one of the things you mentioned was if you have a passion project or something you're working on. And we're going to talk a little bit today about imposter syndrome as we get going in this conversation. And I know for me, like anytime I have felt like there was something I wanted to create or bring out into the world, imposter syndrome it just like stops you dead in your tracks. You think you just are not capable of doing it. So I'm excited to get to touch base on that as well, because I think that will tie really well with the work you do as well. So
It's good.
All right. So let's just get started here in Judges. So this is after Joshua dies, just to give everybody a little bit of a background of what's happening scripturally here. A new generation rises that doesn't necessarily remember God the same way as their previous, the previous what's the word I'm looking for? That they're people that were
Generation.
before them. Generation, thank you. I can't speak. They're not really remembering God in the same way. And the Israelites begin worshiping other gods. They drift away. They lose their spiritual grounding. And because of this, they kind of fall into some oppression. And then they recognize this oppression and they're crying out to God to rescue them, who does try to rescue them, right? He does rescue them. But once things get better, they repeat those same patterns again. And this kind of just becomes the cycle that we see here. And we see cycles like this in the Book of Mormon too. We see cycles like this, just humanity in general. And so I would love to talk a little bit about repeating patterns, those things that we do that just keep us stuck from growth and keep us in that kind of spin cycle where we're never moving forward. What thoughts do you have there?
Yeah, my first thought is, yes, it's in the Book of Judges. Yes, it's in the Book of Mormon. And yes, it's in our day
Yeah,
and in
it's
our
in the
own
Book of Heather
lives,
too, right? Like it's in the Book of Heather.
right? It's in our lives. And again, just like you touched on at the beginning, I think that's why I love this work so much, is because if we can recognize just what we're creating and how we might be staying stuck in this same cycle, we know how we can shift it. It's in where our agency is first accessed, which is in our thoughts. It's checking in and seeing, what am I believing? What am I thinking? What emotion is driving me in my life? I love the awareness that thought work gives us. It gives us a pause so that we can slow down and say, okay, is this what I really want to be creating in my life? Is this serving me? Or is there something better here? So I think it's very much a human nature thing, right? We've seen it repeated throughout all of history, but I don't think that means we have to keep stuck in those patterns. And we can have lots of compassion for ourselves and for past generations, and kind of makes sense why they resort back to some of those old patterns. But ours can be a different story if we desire it to be.
Yeah, so true. So while we're talking about thought patterns, maybe we could just walk through, in case somebody doesn't necessarily understand what we mean by thought patterns. Maybe we could
Yeah.
walk through that process with our listeners so that they can know exactly what it is we're talking about here.
Yeah. So let me think of an example. Well, if we're talking about maybe the result that we have in our life is perhaps we're forgetting the Lord. We're thinking about this pattern where we kind of shift back in old ways. And if that's the result that we have in our life, we can backtrack it and say, okay, how am I showing up in my life? What are the actions or inactions or reactions that I'm doing? And if I've forgotten the Lord, maybe I've become lazy about my approach to pray to Him or to make Him a part of my life. Maybe I've become distracted in other things, and you just see how you're showing up. And in showing up in a certain way, it always comes from an emotion you're feeling. Whether that might be maybe we're just hurried or distracted, or we are uh, we're prideful, or I was thinking lack humility is the same as prideful, or even just forgetful, or we're feeling just
Overwhelmed, I think overwhelmed or anything like that can
yeah,
create a lot of that.
there's a plethora of feelings that we could identify. And
Right.
all of those feelings come from a thought that we're choosing. So, do you wanna do overwhelmed? Which one kind of might
You know
create
what?
that
Let's do
the most?
overwhelmed because I think that might be I think that kind of is an umbrella a little bit, right? It's
Mhm.
kind of more of people might relate to that one. So
Yeah.
let's talk about
So,
overwhelm.
a thought might be just, "I have too much to do," or "I have so much to do," and you feel that overwhelm, and then maybe you might do one of 2 things. You might either try to do it all and burn yourself out, or you might just shut down completely. But what I've learned is, and I think we talked about this in one of um, the Grove conversations, where it's when you just completely shut down or you go all the way to the extreme and you forget the most important things, the basic things. And that might include things that connect us with the Lord. It's sometimes the most important things are the first things that go out the door, fall off our to-do list. And then we end up not making the Lord a part of our lives. And it stems from our thoughts. So, I don't know, how was that model? Is there a better
Yeah, and
one
I
that
think that's
we might
no,
think?
I think that's fantastic. I think that really shows us a really good way to find that excuse me, a good way to have that awareness in our life, right? Just
Yeah,
to look at what it is, just as a quick review, you can just start to see what the results are in your life, what you're getting, what those actions are that are making you feel like you have lost that connection with God or whatever the result is that you're seeing. And then what feeling is it that's driving that inaction, the reaction, the action or the non-action, all of the things. And just to know that all of those feelings are created by thoughts that we think, whether intentionally or intentionally. Did I use the same word? But
right,
whether like on purpose or without us being aware, our brain will think things, and that's the feelings. It drives the feelings. It drives the results. All the things in our lives. So awareness is huge, not for judgment. A lot of people, when you said, look at the
right,
things that you're doing and not doing, I thought, oh, like I felt like this heaviness of like what that creates in me when I think of the things that I'm doing and not doing. And it's not a matter of for you to judge. It's for you to just be aware and to just be curious about why.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I always
So,
think of the model as a tool. A tool, I mean, I think of something as simple as a pair of scissors. It could be
mhm.
used to create some beautiful, snowflakes or a sewing project or, help you accomplish some kind of task, but it also could hurt you if you use it in that way. Much like that, the model is a tool that we could use to hurt ourselves, but that's not what it's intended to do. It's meant to give us awareness so that we can see where our agency really lies. It's in choosing a certain thought that creates a
Yeah.
certain feeling and helps us show up in a certain way. And just like if we bring it back to this part of the Old Testament, I love that the story of how he just keeps forgiving them and keeps giving them another chance and another chance. And I think that's a beautiful example for ourselves as we're using the model to just give ourselves another chance. Like don't make your awareness of where you might be falling short or not showing up in the way that you want. Don't use that as a way of signing yourself off or belittling yourself or judging yourself or shaming yourself or whatever else. It's a chance to say, "Makes sense that you did what you did," or "I showed up the way that I did. Now I want to shift and change. We're gonna try again." And that loving kindness, that long suffering, that tender mercy that the Lord offers to us, we can then offer that to ourselves.
Yeah. So beautifully put. She said the model, which we didn't necessarily reference that phrase when we talked about thought patterns, but that is one of the tools that many coaches use is a tool called the Life Coach School that is a cognitive behavioral therapy based, but it's just the simple model that our circumstances create our thoughts create our feelings drive our actions, and actions is where we create the results in our lives. So we have some episodes here on the podcast that go back and explicitly just teach the model. So if you have more questions on that, they could go back and find that as well. But anyway, I think that's a really some great insight there. Okay, so the patterns that we create in our life that we sometimes feel that we don't have any control over, that they just happen. And actually, we do have a lot more control than we think or even know that we have. So that was a good one. All right, Deborah. Deborah is somebody else that we get to learn about in this part of the scriptures. Is kind of at the bottom of the cycle again, right? And Deborah is a prophetess. She's a judge, and she receives direction from God to tell some people to go into battle. So Barak specifically is who she tells to go to battle. Barak hesitates and says he'll only go if Deborah comes with him. God still delivers Israel, but Barak's hesitation costs him the full honor of victory. It's telling us here. So there's some hesitation on Barak's part. Like he was given direction from a prophetess, somebody who maybe had a little bit more insight. We don't know everything that Deborah knew, but she had some insight there and he hesitated. And I really like looking at this scripture because there are so many times when we hesitate in our life. We feel maybe prompted to do something and then we get scared. Like, oh, maybe maybe this was real, this prompting, or we don't believe in ourselves enough. There are so many ways that our hesitation can keep us from achieving and creating what we want to create in our life. And I just, how have you seen this in your coaching, Michele, and how have you helped people in situations like this?
Yeah. One of the things I teach is this idea that we have protective patterns, and housed underneath protective patterns is the nervous system that's wired within us that God created as part of creating our bodies to keep us safe and to help us survive. It also includes the motivational triad, that human tendency to avoid discomfort, to seek pleasure, and to conserve energy. And these deep human nature patterns that we often show up from. And its whole job is to keep us safe. And sometimes that makes us hesitate or play small or stay small, to not take risk, or to doubt when faith would help us step forward. And so for me, it gives me an opportunity to say it makes sense that we sometimes have that tendency to do that. And again, do we want to stay there? Do we want to live by that? Or do we want to trust and decide to act in faith and move forward? Now, I don't think it also means that we should do things like haphazardly or just throwing caution to the wind or anything like that. But I do think sometimes we might hold ourselves a little bit back. And so I think there's that beautiful balance. I've heard it referred to as the balancing of contraries, where we are thoughtful and intentional, but also we don't just hold ourselves back and just play it so safe that we miss out on growth, or we miss out on potential blessings that the Lord might have for us. For us, I think that is one of the most beautiful things we can learn to do in this life, is learn how to listen to the Lord, to understand the language of the Spirit, to learn how to act in faith, and to trust and be okay even if some things feel like, oh, maybe that didn't work out as well as I thought it would. But in the end, because of the gospel of Jesus Christ, it will always work out in a beautiful way.
Yeah, so good. I think we also learned this this is the same referencing here as what we would talk about with imposter syndrome, right? They kind of all encompass each other when we're lacking confidence. And we read further on in these scriptures about Gideon, who he was hiding versus really showing up in a way that God knew he could show up. And so like that lack of confidence really and imposter syndrome really go hand in hand. One of the things that's been really helpful for me in showing up and creating things that I feel kind of inspired to do, like you had mentioned passion projects. Have you ever read the book called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it. Is it good?
It is so good. And it's been a few years since I read it, but this was my major takeaway from that book, where she said there are things that are just ready to come forth into the world, whether it's a book or a podcast or a particular, I don't know, tool or skill or a piece of art or something. There are things that are ready to come forth into the earth. And like the vibe, the energy is here, and we get to choose whether we're going to grab that and that piece of inspiration, and if we're going to actually bring that forth into the world. Whether we decide to do that or not is up to us, because if we don't, it's going to go on to the next person who might be willing to do that.
Right.
And so that to me gave me some confidence in just thinking that, oh yeah, like the things that need to happen for this to come forth into the world are kind of already been, I don't know, like sanctified in some way. Like God's
Right.
already said, this gets to come forth into the world. Now, who's going to help me? Who's going to partner with me to bring this forth? And
Right.
so it's already there. We just get to take our energy and place it with that and help to create it. And looking at it that way was really helpful for me. Like it gave me a little bit, it gives me a little bit more confidence in creating something and finding confidence in myself to do something. Anyway, I don't know.
I love that. And one of my favorite things about that willingness to step forward and be the one to create it, to move beyond, you could even just hold imposter syndrome and that doubt and fear and still take a
Yeah.
step forward, right? It's just, it's always been a huge motivating factor for me in choosing to show up and create and try is I know who it will help me become in the process. And that's almost just as powerful and motivating to me as whatever I'm going to create in the end. I know it's going to refine me. I know it's going to require new skills or a new willingness or a capacity to hold uncomfortable emotions like imposter syndrome, like doubt, like fear. I really think that's where we can grow to make the biggest impact is when we have the capacity to hold some of these uncomfortable emotions because they don't disappear just because we take a step forward. It's like you carry it with you and it gets a little quieter, but then every once in a while it'll pop up again. But it really does refine you and make you a better version of yourself. And so when I think of, again, wrapping it back to the story um, of Barak, he missed out because he hesitated, and it was his like he missed out on the blessings that could have come had he been willing to go through that process, right? So it's just that process of refining is really what we ultimately miss out on because just like you were saying, it will just go on to the next person who's willing to create it, who's willing
Yeah.
to hold
Yeah.
some of those harder emotions.
I love that you circled back that way to Barack because also I think that helps take away a lot of the transactional views that we sometimes have about blessings. Like we think if
Yeah.
I do this, then God will do this. If I, like, that vending machine type of God that we have kind of come to relate to sometimes. Because when we look at Barak's story, it wasn't that God withheld anything from him because he didn't do it. It's just that he missed out on things that he could have experienced had he done the things that God had offered for him to do. So it wasn't God withholding, it was Barak just not stepping into all of those things that could have blessed his life. And that applies in so many ways in our lives too.
Yeah. And then I contrast that with the story of Gideon, who he felt that imposter syndrome as well. He felt that hesitation, but he went forth. And it's one of my favorite stories in the Old Testament where he has this army and the Lord has him send some home and more home and just by these different filtering methods. And in the end, it's just an army of 300 who are able to defeat the enemies in this unique way of the lanterns and the trumpets and the things. And to me, what is so beautiful about that story is because of his willingness to step forward, even when he had that hesitation in himself or doubt of himself, he trusted the Lord. And because of it, there's this story in the Old Testament that I just imagine him looking back and being like, that just happened. How did that that's just miraculous, and I would have missed out on that if I had stayed stuck in the doubt of himself and not trusted the Lord. So again, it's who you become and it's the miracles you get to behold along the way. And I think that's so worth the effort to hold that fear, hold that doubt, hold that imposter syndrome and still take the next step.
That's so good. I love that. The parallel of those two stories is really good. Okay, let's talk a little bit about self-sabotage. So this kind of comes that we're going to talk about Samson here. And we know that Samson was set apart at birth and given divine strength. He is called to deliver Israel, but he repeatedly makes impulsive decisions, especially in relationships. I don't think there's anybody in the world who still does that, is there? Just kidding. All of
Always
so
fear.
many of us. He gives away his strength, literally and figuratively, to Delilah. Eventually, he's captured, blinded, and he's imprisoned. And that thought right there, even, he gives away his strength, both literally and figuratively, is something I kind of want to address here because we all do that in so many ways. We give away our own power by believing, you know, other people's, what we think other people's opinions are of us, by our own thoughts, all those things. Like we give away our power every time we let somebody else be in control of our life. And so I think that, I mean, that ultimately just leads us to self sabotage. Let me give you a quick little example. So when I was building a business, kept thinking it was like a comparison issue that I was having. I kept thinking that my business needed to look a certain way, needed to look like somebody else's business. And in that comparison, I was handing my power over to this person because I was saying my business should look just like theirs. I was trying to create their business. Really, I wasn't trying to create my business. And and I actually, when I sat down to think about it, that's not really what I even wanted to create. I didn't want to run a business like that. I didn't want the busyness that would come along with running a business like that. But I had given away my power to thinking that my business should be a certain way. And it wasn't until I really defined what it was that I wanted and I let myself lead out and make my own decisions without comparison to anything else, that I was able to create something. Because up until that point, I was just sabotaging creating anything because I didn't, unbeknownst to me, really, I didn't want to create what I was trying to create. So I wasn't creating it at all. And that was a really big aha moment for me, that really tuning in to us, learning who we are, what our wants, what our needs are, rather than looking at somebody else, and is the only way that we can create the life that we truly want to have. Otherwise, it's just this self-sabotage that takes place. So anyway, that's kind of a little bit of a long example, but that to me is always reminds me of what happens when I compare, when I feel weak, or when I let somebody else be the person who I think knows better than I do.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the idea that you bring up that we can exercise our power in our thoughts or what we're believing. And sometimes we let that be what other people are thinking, but really that's where our power lies, is in what we choose to believe. And when we notice some things aren't serving us, we can have awareness of it. We can have awareness that it might be sabotaging us in a certain way. And I think, to me, the first step to shifting that is not only awareness, but just validation and compassion. Like, it makes sense that you showed up that certain way. Honestly, whenever I hear the idea of self-sabotage, I also put right along with it just that protective nature of our minds and our bodies as well. It wanted to You wanted to be successful. You wanted to do it in the best way possible, and you had this example of someone who had created it, so why not try to replicate it? Why not compare yourself? I mean, there's all of these, even just the tendency we have to compare to others, it's a human nature tendency, right? And I've we've heard the saying that goes, comparison is the thief of joy. And I like to say it's actually not the thief of joy. It's the thought about the comparison is the thief of joy, because we're prone, it's a part of survival. It's a part of human nature. We need to compare. Like, what is the better path? What is the better choice? How am I doing? Where was I? Where do I want to be? What's other people doing? How am I going to be accepted in my community? Like, comparison is a law of nature, and it's the thought that we have about it that makes all the difference. And so, in our efforts to shift from self sabotage or self protection, we can have a lot of compassion for ourselves. And when we understand, oh, it makes sense that I did what I did. Is that really how I want to keep living my life? Or is there a better way? And where is my power? It's in my thoughts, what I choose to believe about the situation, about the comparison, about my own capability. I can't get over just the power of what we choose to believe.
It's so true. So good. This, like, I feel like all of these topics that we've discussed today in the book of Judges. That's what, yeah, right? I'm like, what is it? Judges? Yes, it's Judges that we're talking about. It's kind of like this theme that's running through all of these, that the problem isn't necessarily the struggle. The problem isn't necessarily what's going on outside of us, but it's that we just keep repeating. We're not being aware of the things that are happening. We're not being aware of what our involvement is in the story, or how our thoughts are continuing to create that cycle. And it's just that we continue, it's that we repeat it, and that we actually have so much more power than we recognize. The Israelites repeated cycles, right? Gideon doubted his identity. Samson repeats self-sabotage. Deborah she knew who she was, and she was trying to help Barak to know who he was. And we have so many people who we can learn from to help us to shift those repeating cycles, those patterns that we have in our life. And it's whether or not we want to take the time to actually learn from people and all the different tools and skills that they have to offer us, whether we want to take the time to be aware of our thought processes, of the patterns that we're creating. It does take some time and effort. Sometimes it's scary. People don't really want to know. They don't
Right.
want to know that they actually have the power, because it's a lot easier sometimes to blame it on somebody else or something
Yes.
else.
Yeah.
But I promise that it is such the good news that we actually have so much power in our own lives to change and to, like, stop the cycle.
Yeah. Yep. It begins with awareness, and then that willingness to do. In both ways are hard, right? It's hard to just live those patterns, those thought patterns and those cycle, and just living like life is just happening to you. It's hard to shift your thoughts. It's hard to take ownership of them. It's hard to create something different. Both are hard in their own different ways, and both have advantages. And the question just remains, which do you want? What result do you want to create for yourself? Are you okay with this default way of living and repeated thought patterns that aren't serving you? Or are you willing to put forth the effort to shift them to create something even better in the long run?
Yeah, it's so good. One of my favorite questions to ask myself and my clients really is, what if there's more? We always kind of think that this is just as good as it can be. This is as good as it's going to get. And I'm like, but what if there's more? What if I could do something to have more, to be more, to create more? Like, wouldn't I want to try it? So, anyway, I
Oh,
thank you
yeah.
for bringing that up. Like, we get to choose the uncomfortable that we want to have. And anyway, so much that we can learn here from the book of Judges. And I appreciate you being part of that conversation with me, Michelle. Before we leave, can you share with people how they can connect with you?
Yeah, you can come and check out my podcast that I have. It's called Becoming Intentional, Mindset and Grounding Practices for Women of Faith. And in there, I teach some of the principles that I teach in my program. My program is actually called Made for More. So when you're like,
I
is there
love it.
something
Yeah.
more? I was like, oh, that resonates so well, because it's not about adding more to your plate. It's about becoming more, that better version of yourself, and accessing better results. Yes, we choose the hard, but we also choose the good that goes with it. Thanks for
So
having me
good.
here, Heather.
Thanks for being here. And thank you to our listeners for joining us. If you like this format, if you like this shift of bringing in the conversation about come follow me and those scriptures there, we would love to hear from you what you prefer. If this is like, we kind of like the old way, or we like this way, I'd love to hear, so that we can make this exactly what our listeners need and want. So feel free to email us, email@ldslifecoaches.com. We'd love to hear about it. And we will see you again next week. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Hey, we just wanted to thank you for spending part of your day here with us at Latter-day Life Coaches and being part of this conversation. Share this with your friends so that you can have a conversation with them on this topic as well. And as always, subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Have a good one, my friends.